afternoon, everybody. It is, it's a Wednesday by looking at the screen. If you're not looking at the screen, you'll know it's a Wednesday when I say Jim Scarcelli joins us, former Wolverine, and he is on the line and ready to talk some Michigan sports. We're live weekdays at 1 o'clock talking about the latest in Michigan sports, and that's why Scar's here, the former Wolverine. We're locked and loaded on a bunch of different college football and basketball topics. Scar, what's going on, man?
It's all good, Danny. They're in the middle of spring football. I remember going through spring football, and it was tough in the Schembechler era. And I mean, we had 20 practices back then. I think they cut it down to 15 maybe 10 years ago, the NCAA. But those were tough practices because they didn't really, you had no game, so they didn't care how physical the practices were. And it was just, I just thinking about it because I know they're going through it. And it was tough, but that's where you earned your position, man. Because, you normally what they come up with out of spring is how they go into the fall. And normally that's how the pecking order stays intact.
Yeah, and I know, and it culminates in a spring game this year, April the 1st. And I've talked to enough former players, you say, wow, you're really looking forward to the spring game? They're saying, we're looking forward to after the spring game because you go through that. Yeah, you're practicing, you're working, but man, it is a relief once it's done because it's a little bit grueling. Guys are looking forward to letting their hair down a little bit after that final spring practice, which is the spring game. And, it works out nicely that way. Well, speaking of Michigan in the spring game, we've got a lot of college football to talk about. Yesterday, I was talking about short yardage situations and going for it on fourth down and not kicking field goals. And I said today we would talk a little bit about trick plays. So I'm going to ask Scar about trick plays, if he thinks Michigan should be using more of them, where college football is going, maybe less. Michigan has added a big-time football analyst to their staff this week. We want to get Scar's opinion on that. Jim told me via the text that he has some thoughts on Ohio State, so I can't wait for that. Josh Gattis is returning to the Big Ten. We've got a college football rule change to jump in on that may be happening. And we don't always talk about Michigan. It's just 98% of the time we talk about Michigan. Here's one of those times that we won't. We'll talk about the Lions and if they should take a quarterback at number 6 in the upcoming draft. But Scar, after all of that, we are going to start with the Big Ten tournament, which is tomorrow in Chicago. How are you looking at it? I have all the teams up there. I've actually made my picks that I will reveal if you're listening or if you can't see what's on the screen there. But how are you thinking and looking about the Big Ten tournament 23 in Chicago with Michigan set to tip off against Rutgers at midday tomorrow?
So many of those teams can win that thing. Everybody's darn near, other than maybe Nebraska and maybe Minnesota, but they're just good teams. And Michigan is just like anyone else. They could make a run. I like that time slot. I was telling you, I like that noon time slot for the first game. If we can get by Rutgers, a team we beat, but Rutgers play bad. I've watched Rutgers play. They're just like any basketball team, but they really had a bad day shooting against us. Couldn't make a free throw. If we get them the same kind of deal, and we win that game, then we get Purdue. At the noontime slot. I think there's something to be said that having played a game already on a court, there's a bit of an advantage there. You get a feel for the rim. You get a feel for the lighting. Maybe there's maybe you're a little wore out a little bit, but these are young kids. And if you play a lot of guys, the conditioning and playing a back-to-back isn't as much of a deal. But I think Michigan can make a run. We're playing good basketball for the most part, the last 10, 12 games. Two real tough heartbreakers we lost, overtime games. But, we're just going to watch, keep our fingers crossed. And if we get some hot shooting, Jet, and we get Baker making some threes that we were hoping for. We get some hot shooting. Who knows?
Hot shooting sounds like it would be in order. How about just some big shots late when it counts? That'll do it. I have Michigan and Indiana playing in the championship game on Sunday, and I'm just going to go ahead and make my prediction right now for the Big Ten tournament champ this year. I am picking Michigan, so that's my selection. Scar, out of all those teams, if you had to pick a team to win it, who are you going to pick?
I'll tell you a team I think is really good is Penn State. I just think they're a good team. They're capable of winning that thing. Penn State is. Obviously, Purdue has got a good path. But Penn State, Purdue, Michigan, those are teams I think are real good. We can beat Indiana. But we got to play, man. Let's see how we do.
Penn State, Purdue, and Michigan. Scar scattering the board there with three teams on this selection. All right. I want to tell everybody as we move on here, you can join the Maize and Blue Review today. Go to michigan.rivals.com, and there's a special code that we have for you. As spring football is underway, you can get full access today by going to michigan.rivals.com. You buy 1 month, you get 4 free. You use the promo code UMSpring23. UMSpring23, buy 1 month, get 4 free. That sounds like a great deal to me. All right, Scar, let's move to some college football and talk about it. We saw it on the menu, the trick plays. Michigan, the trick play that they used in the semifinal, they used on the fourth down from the 2-yard line. It was the Philly not so special. People remember that one. If you go back to the game before, you remember on that 2-point conversion, they had, I think, 3 tight ends that they used. That one was effective. Of course, Ohio State, they used the jump pass with Khalil Mullings. That qualifies as a trick play. That might have been the trickiest play I've ever seen from Michigan. What do you think about trick plays? Obviously Michigan's going into their bag with Jim Harbaugh, and you can almost count on one a game. You think that stays the same? You'd like to see more? You'd like to see less?
I think it's good. I think they give a defensive coach, a defensive team problems. But my thing with trick plays is they got to come off and look like some of your best plays. Okay, now I think about the trick play, the Donovan Edwards halfback pass in the championship game 2 years ago. That's a play we run many, many times. The bubble to Donovan out in the flat. We run it. So you run, like for us, we want to run like when we ran our I called it power reverse. We ran that early in the year many times. We ran it against Ohio State last year. But we have plays that look like other plays that look like your best plays, and then have a little tweak to them. Those are the best trick plays. Those are the ones that fool defenses. I, as a coach, I had them in. We had those plays in. And again, that's my philosophy is those are the ones that are most effective because the defense is geared up to stop the best stuff. They've seen your best plays. And then here's a little tweak that now puts the defense in more conflict, and it also adds to the effectiveness of your best plays because now they always have to think about those plays in the back of their mind, the defensive players. So that's my thing on them. Yes, I would add them. I think we saw in our spring game last year, we saw Eric All throw a halfback pass or throw a tight end pass. Remember that in our spring game last year?
Yes.
So we know Donovan can throw it. But those things, the spring game, there's people, they're all going to scout that. People are going to scout that game. They're going to have they'll know. And that's where you want to run some of those things. Let them worry about, I don't know. I don't know which of these tight ends can throw a ball, but let them worry about those things to be concerned with them.
Yeah, I like your idea of making it look like something that you always do and then springing it on them. And that would even go, even though I didn't like it, worked. So I liked it, but I didn't like in theory the jump pass against Ohio State. But nobody in a million years would have guessed that Khalil Mullings would have been jumping up.
Yeah, but Denny, that formation and that down and distance, that play looked like just a vanilla straight dive play.
Right.
So
right.
It was a play by formation, down and distance. It was a play that looked like something that we would have just simply ran him in there to try to pound it in there. Now the Philly special, that's it's a little different. It's a little different than what do we run off of that makes the defense leave that open. But yeah, the jump pass is something that I would say plays right along with my line of thinking, because it looks exactly like a play that we would run in that down and distance formation, personnel, field position.
Yeah, the thing with the Philly special, as you pointed out, running it into a zone defense they should have audibled out of that, and they didn't. So I think that one was doomed from the start. The whole thing, I think maybe I'm more a conservative in nature, even if it comes down to gambling. I know people are like, hey, this team's plus 7,000. Let me take the dog because, and I just think about having a guy who is a linebacker who, you put in at running back that you're going to throw the pass, and, throwing a pass. I like guys that, when you're running the Wildcat, I like the idea of an angle, just like when you're throwing a bounce pass into the center, you have an angle from the side, and it's geometry. I don't like the idea. It was back like when Michigan was playing Michigan State and they had Haskins with the Wildcat, and Josh Gattis was like, well, if it works, everybody loves stuff. If it don't, they hate us. It's like, no, I hated the idea of taking the ball and throwing it over the middle where you don't have the angle and everything else. And that's why I don't like the jump pass. There's so many things that can go on. Plus you had a guy that had just moved over. But when you listen to Jim Harbaugh, he was like, well, we're going to run it with Blake Corum, which even made me more like, wow, these guys are just really taking the dice and firing them out there, but it worked when it came down to that. And I think it's just me more being risk averse. Like, I get at any play where you're having the wide receiver or the running back throw the ball, that's not the same as a quarterback. And how many times have I seen it where it's a wide receiver or running back, a non-quarterback, they tell them all the time, like, only if it's there. And yet it seems like more times than not, they're throwing it into hot coverage or whatever else. But I think it's just me being more safe than maybe than other people. People like to gamble.
I think you have to have it. That's one of the things I think our offensive coaches in Jim, leading it, has just done it. I just think you have to put a defense in conflict. You have to have your base stuff, our power, our zones. That's our base stuff. But then you've got the little things off of it. You got to have deception. Remember, Denny, the old art of war. All warfare is based on deception. Okay, so you gotta have a little bit of deception to make your basic stuff work better, to put the defense in conflict. So I am a believer in subtle trick plays. I like them, and you got to rep them and perfect them, just like anything else.
Sounds like Jason agrees with you. Of course, Jason has let the cat out of the bag that he's actually done some coaching or is in coaching. He says in big games he doesn't mind trick plays. You can practice them and use the quote unquote normal formations, like you said, Scar. He says I love it. Smith doesn't sound like he likes them. If you run trick plays, it means you have no scheme against the defense you're playing. Trick plays should almost never be used at critical times of the game.
I mean, I think they're good. You want to use them at any time. You don't want to just use it at a certain time. But it's I guess it depends on what we call a trick play. I'd like to pull. Maybe I'll pull some Michigan stuff up. Like I think the power reverse, a play we ran many times this year. We gave the ball to number 3. What the heck? We can give him a couple times. But anyway, that play it's a low risk play, and it looks exactly like our best football play. And I just, people would call it a trick play, but it's not very risky at all, because our linemen are doing the same things they do, for some of our best plays. So you want plays that they look different to the defense. Your players aren't asked to do something they don't normally do. And that's when those kind of plays give defenses problems. So,
yeah, AJ Henning you're talking about. I thought it was tricky by Michigan to not have AJ Henning really on offense very much. Having him. I don't know if it was just concentrating.
That was his name, Henning. I'm drawing a blank.
I was surprised, and look, everything worked out. So me, sitting around saying, well, I'm surprised you didn't use more jet sweeps or end arounds with AJ Henning. I'm surprised they didn't put him in the backfield more. I think they tried it one time. So I like that idea. I don't know how tricky that is, putting AJ Henning in the backfield, but it's just like, I don't know how tricky it was putting Khalil Mullings instead as his normal depth as a running back, the one that he fumbled on in the semifinal. They had him kind of up close or offset, and it was kind of a quick go. I don't know if you call that a dive or whatever you would call that, Scar, but I don't know if that's tricky or not. That was just.
I'll say something else that that if you want to talk about how are you defining trick? I mean, one of our best offense, it probably our coach's best offensive performance all year was against Penn State, and much of that was formations and shifting in motions. We got them just so misaligned with just pre-snap stuff. And then we ended up running our vanilla plays. So we had little subtle tweaks with formation, motions, shifting, and we got the Penn State coaches all confused. So that's another form of deceiving the opponent that, people might call it a trick. It's a trick in terms of formation. It's a trick in terms of motion or shifting that you're constantly trying to do to confuse the defense. So, that's the things I also like as an offensive coach to give the defense problems. Shifting, motions, crazy formation. Jim's done a ton of different formations when he was at San Fran, when he was at Stanford, bringing 6-7 offensive linemen in the game. Those are the things, a defensive coach sees those things on film, and it's like, oh, man, I gotta be watching for this when he brings these guys in. How are we going to line up when he had 6 dudes over here and 2 guys over here, and he's got this big tackle with a 80, and so all those things create confusion for defensive coaches and players.
I like it, and I do, as just somebody watching the game. I like some pre-snap eye candy, what you're talking about there. Andres likes to go to a trick play after a sudden change. And
a lot of people like to throw that, a lot of coaches do that. They like to throw deep because they, trust me, our coaches on defense always talked about sudden change, that you got to be mentally tough and know that a lot of offensive coaches like to do that. They like to throw it because you're jogging on the field. You've got hurt feelings. The offense just turned the ball over. And you're feeling sorry for yourself. I mean, I covered that as a coach too with my players. You got to get them fired up, and you got to let them know, hey, this is where people want to, test your mental toughness. They might want to throw the deep one on you, and you got to be ready for it. You're not going to be, feeling sorry for yourself because you got the ball, the offense turned the ball over.
Smith sounds exactly like my friend Reno. He's like, if you have to go to gadgets, you're not a good football team. The quarterback throws it, the running back runs it. I mean, that's exactly the kind of chapter and verse stuff. This might be him. I'd have to check to see if it is him. AM talking about fake punts with a thumb up, fake field goal, thumbs down. I know by watching, this is going to be the true test next year. If the Lions, we think they're going to compete in the NFC North, these last 2 years, we knew that they weren't really competing for anything. And even if they were out of it before they were competing anything. And so Dan Campbell was throwing the dice on everything on Thanksgiving, on a 3rd and 1 with the clock. The smart thing to do would have been, handing it off. But no, he decided to roll the dice and take a shot. Ended up costing the Lions a game there. After they had no chance at making the playoffs against the Packers, he was running a pass backwards to, his wide receiver. He was running a fake punt, from his own 20. It's easy to do if you're out of it. You don't have, if they start doing that kind of stuff when you're in it, fake punts in your own end and things like that. Sometimes I hear the coaches, they say, well, we didn't even put it in. They're just programmed. If they see it, doesn't matter where they're at on the field. If they see something when they're out there, they can just call it. Those fascinate me.
Denny, I know early in the year, they lost some games and he was a real high risk guy, but I was at that game in New York where he ran on 4th down. He ran that boot pass. It was really a risky high risk, but it was a touchdown, so there's a pro and con to it. And then when you get that reputation as a play caller, that you have a lot of things in your playbook, like Jeff Brom. That's why I've always said Jeff Brom was one of the last guys in the Big Ten I'd want to defend because he just has a lot of different things, man. He's got a lot, and you have to study those things as a coach. So listen, I like it, but you better rep it. You better be good at it, and all those things are good. They give defenses problems.
Yeah, I mean, you get criticized anytime you lose and anything, but if you do something unorthodox and it doesn't work, then you really get criticized. It reminds me, Andrew, I've always liked the idea myself before the half, a situation where people think you're going to just spike it. Everybody lines up. You might have a guy like you would have in victory formation, and then you fake it, and then you try something. Michigan tried it this year, and I saw everybody on Twitter. It's like, what are they doing? They can't even. They were trying to, fake everybody out is what they were trying to do. I like this idea, Andrew. You get up there for the scrum and everybody thinks you're all, packed in there. And then you come off and you fake it off that. I kind of like that deception. I've always liked that. Dan Marino was one of the first ones. He was down and he was telling everybody, spike it, spike it, spike it. And I think he was against the Jets, and the Jets were kind of just like standing there. And it was a fake. It was a fake spike, and he ended up throwing it in there for a touchdown. Everybody's like, Dan Marino's the greatest of all time. So, there is a point to, like, when you do things like that and they work, and everybody's like, you're awesome. And then when they don't, you're like, you're a goofball for, trying silly things. So there is a point to that.
I admire the coaches that create those things because it's tough. And then you have that reputation forever. And to this day, people have to honor the fake spike. Ever since that play, Denny, defensive coaches all over the country have to honor that kind of stuff.
That's right. People are going back to the Boise, Oklahoma bowl game when Boise was doing Statue of Liberties and all this stuff, and they beat Oklahoma. That was one of the most memorable bowl games ever. I'm with you on that. Andre's talking about the Statue of Liberty on the first touchdown of 21. Against
we ran that play against Ohio State, and yep. It's a play we had never run, but the play was really well designed, and our offensive players it was similar to a play that we ran, so they weren't really asked to do much different, but it was well designed. I love it. And again, those things the Buckeyes are going to have to always worry about that play because it's in our playbook.
There you go. People arguing about it a little bit. Smith coming back and saying, what about those trick plays against the Horned Frogs and the Bulldogs? He's right against that. The Philly special did not work. And I don't think, like, if Harbaugh came out even against like East Carolina or UNLV next year and he went to the Philly special, I think there would be a lot of groans. He lined up for it to try. Even if they scored a touchdown, I think people would be like, what's he doing with the Philly special? So I don't know. All right.
Well, those are, Denny, those games are, in a way, you want to show a lot of stuff. I had the philosophy sometimes that I'd like to show stuff that we really weren't going to run that much. Some of those plays to opponents so they see it and then they have to worry about it. So there's an upside to showing a lot of those crazy plays. If you got a 28-point lead, who cares? You run it, you rep it, you perfect it. Your players, you perfect and get some of the errors out of it. The defenses have to see it. So there's an upside to that.
All right. You mentioned Ohio State just about a minute ago, and you had some thoughts about something with Ohio State that you saw this week.
Denny, I'm just thinking about the Buckeyes. These are some good thoughts. Number one, I've talked about it. Kevin Wilson's gone. He's in Tulsa. Kevin Wilson is a real good offensive line coach. We'll see how good this other guy is, but I'm glad he's gone. Okay, their QB's gone. This kid, I don't care who they come in with, he's not going to be as good as that guy. The game's in Ann Arbor. It's another good thing. We got Ryan Day back. More good news. Third base is back. But another big thing, Danny, the last thing I had on my list is we know now what they're going to do on defense. We went into this game last year. We didn't know really what Jim Knowles was about. But that's an advantage. Look, they know our system now. They know what we do on defense. They've seen it 2 years now. But we now know what to work on in the spring, what to work on in the fall. And I just think those are all good signs, good things for Michigan as we gear up for that game that we know. And I guarantee you this spring, we're working on Ohio State, and our offensive coaches know exactly some of the things we need to work on, in terms of alignments and schemes that the Buckeyes are going to give us, because that's the stuff you work on in the spring. you work on Michigan State, you work on Penn State, and you work on Ohio State's best stuff.
I can tell you, I'm right with you in your mindset and where you're at. And if you look at the history of this series, it really gets lopsided one way and then it goes lopsided the other. That bodes well for Michigan after winning 2 in a row. And the other thing I know for the majority of the previous to these last 2 years, Ohio State, they were in the Michigan players' heads. They certainly were in the fans' heads, the coaches' heads, the media's heads. They were in there. I think Michigan is now in Ohio State's head, and it's a big thing. The mental advantage of where Michigan is at, thinking that they have turned this thing around. It's spiraling one way. They can continue doing it. They can beat Ohio State. They can win the Big Ten. They can go to the college football playoff. Those are not small things, and I think that's a great thing for Michigan where they're sitting right now. They felt it last year, and now that you do it 2 times in a row, the confidence just has you sky high in where you're at, everything mentally with Ohio State, plus all those things that we're all, I think everybody would agree with that you're talking about, the tangible things that you were looking at with coach. And
I'm just looking at it. Just want to, we got momentum. Momentum matters, Denny, but you got to have good players and good coaches that execute. And we've done that the last 2 years, that have great scheme, that have enough trick plays. And, but yeah, I just really like what I'm looking at as we prepare for that game.
Hey,
here's the quick, go ahead, read that.
You want me to read it? Do you think it's going to stay the same, Scar?
He has a foundation. I think he has a real solid foundation of what he does. And, obviously he's not dumb. He's going to do some different things against us. We'll do different things, but we have a pretty good idea about what he really, his real beliefs are in certain formations and what he wants to do against Michigan. And he'll tweak some things, but, basically though, we have a good idea about his guts and glue and what he wants to go to stop our stuff. And Denny, I believe in a lot of ways he's going to do a lot of the same things because he did have a lot of success stopping our run game, other than them real big plays that late in the game. So I bet you he feels good about his run defense. Can he do it without giving up the big plays in the pass game also like they did? So. Those are the things their coaching staff is going to, try to decide what do they want to do. But our coaches will have again, we're working on it. So I like that we know his basic mindset.
I like it when Jim Scarcelli, the former coach, the former Michigan player, uses phrases like guts and glue, because it reminds me, just even before the show, he was using phrases that Bob Ufer would use because he was talking about this was well-conceived and equally well-executed, and now he's talking about the guts and glue of the maize and blue, which, of course, was quick. So good job on that, Scar. Now, Scar, I want to see something here. Last week you were talking about Nick Saban rating Notre Dame and going after their offensive coordinator. And now Michigan's former offensive coordinator, you thought, well, because these are guys that, because you get a little bit about the former coach and you'll know a little bit. And now Josh Gattis, who was at Michigan, goes to Maryland. Do you think that's what was going on with Maryland by bringing Gattis in? And that might be some negative things for Michigan because Gattis knows what makes Michigan tick.
Well, I don't, I saw that him and Mike Locksley worked together at Alabama, so they had a relationship. They had some words, when they first got the job there. I remember Gattis was ripping on this, that. But anyway, they're working together. I don't know if he's a analyst or if he's a position coach. I don't, the answer to that question, but he is working with Maryland. So Josh Gattis is in Maryland. I mean, okay, yeah, you can know what we run and how, a lot of people can see the plays we run and how we do it. And, that there might be some of that as to what, was Mike Locksley's thinking as to why he brought Gattis in. But, we run what we run and you got to stop it. And, I just wonder is what his role is going to be there. Will he negative recruit against Michigan? What's Gattis going to do when he's talking to a kid that Michigan's talking to in recruiting? Because, he's a good recruiter. That was one of his strengths. So that's just something I would wonder. What's he going to do in terms of when Michigan and Maryland are recruiting the same kid? But as far as him being there, knowing what we run, I'm not concerned about. I really wouldn't be concerned about it because we run what we run, man. And there's no.
I would be concerned if you're a recruit, if he was going to bang my mom. Now he's listed as
Danny, you didn't pull no punches. You came out swinging there, man.
He's listed as co-offensive coordinator.
Okay, so he's a paid coach then. He's not an analyst. They found a position for him then.
There you go.
Okay.
Well, you had the college football rule changes 2 weeks ago. You went over all of them, and you think that they're going to go with one of them, is that they think they're going to push through with a couple of these?
It's a big one, Denny. It's a big one. I talked about it. They were contemplating going to the NFL where the clock runs after a first down. Okay, and now in college football, the clock stopped when you made a first down. So basically, though, what this is going to do, it's going to shorten the game, and it's going to hurt the teams that have better players. If you got better players and more depth, you want a long game. You want more snaps. You want 120. You want a whole bunch of snaps, right? So if you don't have the depth and if you don't have the talent, you want to shorten the game. Okay. So this is, in my opinion, it doesn't help Michigan. I don't think it helps Michigan because I think most of the teams that we play on our schedule, we're going to have better players than them. So it is what it is. And it's going to shorten it. It's going to take 8-10 snaps off of probably both sides of the ball. I bet it takes a good 8-10 snaps maybe on each side of the ball. So there's less room for error now. You know what I mean? There's less room for error.
Yeah, I looked at some of the studies, and you're right about the snaps, and they determined that it would take 6 to 8 minutes off of a game. And you're right. Overall, I mean, it is. If there is going to be an advantage, it would be to the underdog. I don't think this is a big time blow, to the favorites or anything else. I'm glad that they're not going to keep the clock running on incomplete passes. I thought that was going to be a little bit too much. I'll be interested to see I'm fine with it. If maybe in the last 2 minutes of each half or last 5 minutes, they go back to where they're going to stop the clock a little bit. Kind of keep the old college flavor to that. I'm not sure if they've looked at that, if they've determined, but I hear what
listen, let's say we're playing Indiana, and Indiana has 30 good football players, 15 good ones on defense and 15 good ones on offense. And Michigan has 50 good players, 25 good ones on defense and 25 good ones on offense. This is going to help them because now the depth that Michigan has won't be as big of a factor. So, I think it matters. I think the depth and how well you recruit, this minimizes your advantage. So I think it is a factor, and it is what it is.
All right.
Anyway, this question here, there was a question about, do I think people are going to imitate what TCU did? Yeah, I think everybody in the Big Ten is going to look at that TCU game. I agree with you, Jason. They're going to look at things and say, okay, how can we incorporate some of this stuff they did against Michigan into our system? But our coaches aren't stupid too. We know it. Our coaches know it. We got to do a better job defending what TCU did.
Jason is talking about getting dressed in the dark and putting on two different colored socks. It reminds me of a story about 10 years ago when I went to a party with my wife, and it was her cousin. And we were there, and I had the exact same pair of running shoes as somebody else in their family, but I didn't wear my running shoes there. I wore some dress shoes. But upon leaving, I put those running shoes on because I thought they were mine. And so I left, and it come to find out, like the guy was going to leave, and he's like, somebody stole my shoes. Somebody thought, And, it wasn't until like a week later when I was rummaging through and I was going to put on my shoe. For 1 minute, it was a very odd situation for me, Scar, because I picked up the one shoe and I put it on and I put the other one on and I had two right shoes and I couldn't figure it out. Like, sometimes you do something, you're like, okay, it was early in the morning. I'm like, okay, but I couldn't. I had the right shoe. And for about 1 minute, I sat there and I'm like, now I don't understand this. How could I actually have two right shoes? But it just so happened that the two lefts kind of got separated, and then I figured it out after a minute, and then it ended up being a funny story that they still use to this day. So it can happen. There it is. Okay, we are now going to get to some Lions and the draft. As you know, Scar, the Lions have the sixth pick in the upcoming NFL draft. And I feel like after the combine that the Lions are sitting in a very excellent spot, a very envious spot. Because before I thought it was a 5-player draft with Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and Will Levis as the 3 quarterbacks, and then Will Anderson from Alabama, and then Jalen Carter, who we talked about last week from Georgia. I thought those were the 5 players. And then after that, say a 5-player draft, it was really wide open. But the way that Anthony Richardson tested, the AR-15, the Florida quarterback in Indy, he has moved himself into the top, certainly the top 6, maybe the top 5, heck, who knows, maybe in front of Levis. So now it seems like it's a 6-player draft. I wouldn't mind the Lions getting any of those 6 players, any of the 4 quarterbacks or Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. So I think they're sitting in a great spot. What do you think?
Yeah, when it comes to quarterbacks, I bet you there's a lot of different thought processes with general manager and head coaches. Some guys might say, maybe we'll try a guy like Mitch Trubisky, a guy who's someone else went through the growing pains with. Some guys might say, let me get the kid from the Jets, Wilson. They went through the growing. There are some coaches and general managers that say, let's get the kid after 2-3 years. And now there's other guys that say, well, you're not going to get a Joe Burrow like that, or you're going to have to draft them. So our coaches are looking at those things. The Lions are looking at those things. You take a kid like the kid from Florida, you have to then decide, am I going to run my quarter? I think it's good. You guys have all heard me talk. I like the teams that have the ability to run your quarterback a little bit. I mean, you look at Philly. I mean, they were so tough to defend because the kid could do both. He could run and throw, and Mahomes can do both, run and throw. So, Denny, I think the Lions are going to take a good look at a quarterback this year. There are some good ones available. But Campbell, I tell you, I'd love to play for this guy, but he has a great way he has really instilled confidence in Goff and, pumped this guy up from day one when, LA wanted to get rid of him. And I think the guy he's playing pretty good. And Campbell just does a great job, I think, of working on the mind of that quarterback and, letting him know he's got faith in him, man. And that may have had a factor as he's played pretty, this last year, pretty darn good for the Lions.
The big story today, Scar, and it's kind of what we're talking about here, is that there are a lot of NFL teams that, at least according to the insiders, I know you like that when I say they say, a bunch of these NFL insiders say that there are all these quarterback hungry teams that don't want to pay Lamar Jackson $250 million and give up 2 picks. Do you think the Lions were in any situation where they would think about giving Lamar Jackson $50 million a year and $250 million guaranteed and coughing up 2 draft picks to get
Danny, I think Lamar Jackson is, he's a system quarterback. You have to say, look, I'm going to run a lot of the stuff that Baltimore runs. Some coaches don't want to run that stuff. They don't want to run their quarterback as much as Baltimore does. And that's a big part of why he's so hard to defend. It's some of those predetermined runs. Same thing with Philly. That's why they're so hard to defend, because you've got the predetermined runs in there. But there's a downside. There's the risk of injuries. And there's some coaches that don't want that. They don't want to pay a guy, $250 million and have him, take so many shots in a game. And that's what makes him so effective, is his ability to run. So, yeah, it's interesting. that I was just reading something earlier that it doesn't appear there's as much interest in him as maybe he was hoping. But I think a lot of it has to do with the system. There's some teams that don't want no part of a Matthew Stafford or a Tom Brady. There's some guys that just don't want him anymore. They can't late in their career, they couldn't, they can't run. And there's other guys that's what they want. And there's other guys that want the guy that can run. So I think Lamar's, his skill set, I don't know that it's appealing to every NFL football team.
Yeah, OT asking why the Lions would get rid of Goff for Jackson. It makes zero sense. I agree with you, OT, and I'm a big Lamar Jackson fan. The Lions shouldn't be interested in Lamar Jackson. The way Jared Goff played last year, now I think they should be interested in a quarterback at 6. It's a perfect setup. You can have Goff certainly for a year as a bridge quarterback. You can even have him if it really works out. Great. If Goff is great next year, like he was in the final 8 games, well, you're all right. You're doing fantastic there. But if Goff played, like he did in the first half of last year, and you didn't feel really good about him, I'd have no problem saying, yeah, $250 and $50 a year for Jackson and the 2 picks. Let's go, because it's about getting that QB. The Lions have a quarterback right now. If you can get the cheap option and groom somebody underneath them, it's a perfect scenario for them. But I agree, OT, they should not be coughing up all of that money and draft capital for Lamar Jackson. So I'm with you there.
No, I love watching him play. He's hard to defend. I've said this before. If there's one team in the NFL, 4th down on the 3-yard line, the last team in the NFL I would want to defend would be Baltimore with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. I'm talking 4th down on the 3-yard line, 3rd and goal to win it, because that team they can run anything. They can, run it with him, which really, stresses the defense. So there's a big upside to him. The downside is a lot of that stuff he's taking hits. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good points being made here. Like, Jason's talking about Will Levis, and it's the same thing with Anthony Richardson. He's got all those measurables and everything. And I watched him play against Utah last year, and he was great. But overall, his completion percentage, you're hoping that you can mold him into something because he has all of the raw materials. And I think it's the same thing with Levis. He can throw the ball the length of the field. It's a little bit like Josh Allen when he was coming out of Wyoming. The kid has just got such a great cannon and arm that you think that maybe after a year that you can get all that other stuff and, you can work with them. But those guys aren't walking in and playing Levis and Richardson. They're not stepping into any team next year and being the starting quarterback. But, people love, the talent, arm talent.
Yeah, he must have the measurables. He must look good on the hoof. He's a big kid, probably throws the ball. He did good in his combine, and, maybe his film wasn't the best, but, he's got the measurables, and that's the stuff that these guys like.
He was doing weird things. I watched him throw at the combine. He was doing some kind of like reverse pivot, like that looked like he would have been pivoting into the pass rush. I think he was trying to show that he could throw off platform and throw against the grain and everything. But as I watched it, I thought he looked ridiculous doing that. I downgraded him. I watched what's his name from Georgia, Stetson Bennett. I'm not talking about taking him with the 6th pick, maybe in the 6th round. But Bennett, just like when I watched him play Tennessee this year, that guy, he's just a little guy, and he was a walk-on and everything, but he's got a hose as good as any of those guys. He can throw the ball like the length of the field. I like Stetson Bennett if the Lions don't go for a quarterback late in this draft. That's where I'm at.
I agree with you, man. The kid's good. He's smart. He's accurate. He can run. He's mobile. He's a guy I don't want to defend. Denny, how about some good news? Big recruit, a big-time receiver from River Rouge decommitted to Michigan State. So he's open. So it's always good news when someone, a big-time kid, decommits to Michigan State. So he is out there, and the Wolverines are in on the mix. So we'll see what happens. But I've seen him play. He's a big, good-looking, talented kid out of River Rouge, receiver.
Nick Marsh?
That's the guy. So that's good news. Michigan State lost their big pass rush coach. So that's also good news. He's going to the Seattle Seahawks. So that's always good to hear those kind of things happening up in East Lansing.
Yeah, I saw the Dan. I was hanging out in the Maize and Blue Review today. They were all talking about Marsh, and it sounds like if you're a Michigan fan, you should keep real close attention for these next couple days because they were saying that Marsh comes from a Sparty family. So if Michigan can, if they're gonna turn him and he's gonna be blue, it's gonna be pretty quick. And if it's playing out longer, then it's probably not going to be in the cards for Michigan. That's what the experts were looking at, coming up, and some of the gurus on the Maize and Blue Review talking about Nick Marsh. But we'll see. I mean, that's not me. That was me, my just initial foray into taking a look at that. And maybe now that I think about it, maybe it wasn't one of the actual experts that was saying that his family was green. It was maybe some posters. So maybe I take all that back.
I mean, I just wonder what happened. Did he have a connection to that coach that left? Was that the guy who was recruiting him? The D-line coach that went to the Seahawks? I don't know. Something happened, and I wonder what, we don't know, but it's good news.
I think the connection is that Michigan State in the offseason, there were a lot of players thinking, hey, cash, cigars, money, pay to play. This is the place to be. Then they, start thinking about it. Everybody's like, this football program sucks. And these guys were all like, I'm out of here. That's what I think. That's my read on the situation at Michigan State.
I hope you're right.
I don't know. It's a guess. All right, Scar, anything else? We had
we brought in a former teammate of mine as an analyst. Mike Mallory was brought in last week. A good friend of mine, guy I played with. He's been coaching for like 35 years. He's been a coordinator. He coached at Illinois. I mean, the guy's been at probably 13, 14 different cities. Part of that great Mallory family. So he is now working as an analyst. He is a great coach. He's got a Super Bowl ring from the New Orleans Saints. And I'm glad he's helping out. He's going to be working, I think, with the special teams a little bit. So Mike is on board, another Michigan man, and I'm fired up that he's back home. He came full circle. He left 30 some years ago, and he's back.
So you got Mike, you got Doug, you got Kurt. I mean, you got Bill. I mean, how many Mallorys are there?
Yeah, Mike and Doug are with Michigan now as analysts. Kurt is the head coach at Indiana State. So, they come from a great coaching family. The old man was a great coach.
Yeah, I was looking at Mike's career history. Indiana, Kent State, Eastern Illinois, Rhode Island, Northern Illinois, Maryland, Illinois, Kansas, Louisville, the Saints, the Jags, and the Denver Broncos. I mean, that's quite a lot of stops there for Coach Mallory.
Well, that's when people talk about how much money coaches make, and I know he's a friend of mine, and I know guys that the commitment they got to make and all the moves they got to put their family through. So when you do finally get yourself in a position to be a head coach, you should be rewarded because they're picking their family up every couple of years and moving them. You get fired, the team gets fired sometimes even if you're good and the coach gets a job, he doesn't always take you. So here's a comment. Marsh is taking the money and going to Tennessee.
Yeah, well, there could be a lot of guys that makes sense because State was kind of throwing cars and come on in and get aboard. We're pay to play. But once you got up there and maybe you got your first installment, like, the hell with this. And then, Marsh is like, hey, what else can I get out there in terms of a signing bonus? And, Tennessee's offering up some signing bonuses. So it makes sense. I don't know if he's right or not, but
I bet there's a lot to that. And Tennessee has a history of being ready, willing, and able to pay to get guys. I've shared that story, Denny, back in the day, when we played that Tennessee team in a ball game and got beat, maybe 20, I think Lloyd was coaching. But I remember talking to some of my guys, Jimmy Herman and Brady was an assistant then, and they told me that Tennessee, every time they were out there recruiting and they were dealing with a same kid Tennessee was recruiting, they knew money was involved, and they just thought that Tennessee was the most unethical coaching staff that was out there in that era, in that Phil Fulmer era, where they were crooked. And so they got money there. They want a team. And I totally believe they're able to ante up. So you better, you want to compete against them. They got deep pockets over there.
Well, running up to NIL, they were the team that was found out that were putting, big bags of cash in McDonald's bags. It's frustrating when I hear about NIL. It's like, what team isn't offering? I know Michigan's not. I hate to say this. It seems like Michigan is the only. I mean, it sounds like totally. It sounds like an excuse. It sounds homerish. It sounds like Michigan is like the only one that's doing anything right. But is Michigan the only team that is not paying signing bonuses and upfront money? And if they are, maybe they should be looking into doing it or finding out how they can get involved. But I don't know. I know they're dying on the hill, and sometimes they talk about it too much. But it feels like Michigan's the only team that's not doing it. So I don't know. Northwestern maybe is not.
Yeah, we really don't know exactly what's being said to these recruits at Michigan. We just don't. We don't know what's being said to them. But I do like that. I do like the fact that Blake Corum is coming back. So we can talk about NIL all you want with these 17, 18-year-old unproven guys, which we know we still got to get those guys. But I like the idea that we have a plan to get him back, guys like him back, and guys that like JJ who aren't leaving. North Carolina had to fight off a bunch of people to keep their quarterback.
Scar, it is a great counterpoint to Michigan not getting involved in NIL, because at this time last year, you're wondering if they were going to be able to do anything. Were they ever going to be able to get a transfer? Were they ever going to be able to get any recruits? And, they talked about they're going to compensate the players that are here. Well, they did exactly what they said. They were able to keep a number of players, in addition, to Blake Corum, both of their interior offensive linemen, a linebacker or two, a defensive player or two. The way it's working right here, right now, as it applies to Michigan next year, and they were able to raid with the Magnificent Seven in the transfer portal. They've hit the jackpot with NIL and with the transfer portal. It's just the last piece that we're talking about. Will they be able to pull in big-time recruits? And, that's the one that we're waiting on. Maybe they don't have to. Maybe they can just go to the transfer portal after these guys go through a cycle of a year and get their money, and maybe they'll be able to thrive doing that.
We always got to remember, Danny, we got to evaluate a head football coach and his program based on the results on the field. So, everybody has a different philosophy of how they want to go about their nil money or their development, their strength and conditioning, whatever it is. But it all gets down to those 13, 14 games in terms of how you're going to evaluate the guy. You can't.
There you go. There you go, Scar. That's it.
Winning the recruiting. Listen, winning the recruiting battle matters, and getting those high rankings matter. But you got to win on the field too. So
they're doing that right now, which I like.
That's right.
All right,
Jason Taylor is coaching at Miami, former All-Pro defensive end. And there was a comment about one of our listeners talked about 1997 era. A former Michigan guy that he knows that Miami, the Canes, were paying up and anteing up, and I believe it. I got recruited by Miami. I definitely believe that statement.
What did they offer you, Scar?
I met with some big rich guy that he owned a tomato canning. He had all these properties and tomato. He was a tomato guy. But he said I'd always have a job, and just they didn't offer me a lot of, they didn't offer me money, but I just sensed it, I believed it, and other things I've heard over the years.
Just think, with the name Scarcelli and tomatoes, some kind of sauce.
Yeah, he had some kind of big tomato business, and Yeah,
Could have been some spaghetti sauce with Scar
that's right.
on it. Scar, is that a shirt from the 21st? It looks, I know some of
Man,
those.
I got a hard time. This is Michigan camp. I worked that camp for 15 years, man, long time. Went
There
to
it
it.
is.
I just, I got a hard time throwing away Michigan stuff, man. This shirt is old and raggedy, but got a hard time throwing it out, man.
You sound like my wife. We've got a basement full of stuff, and we were going through, and we had, and I had a bag of, garbage. I was putting things in, and she went in there. She's like digging things out. She's like, "We have a rule: you don't throw anything out with Michigan." I was like, "What? Nobody's worn this in 20 years." Like, all right, so I get that.
Yeah, a lot of stuff goes to Salvation Army, but the Michigan stuff, a lot of great memories from that camp, man. Worked with a lot of great players and great coaches. And learned a lot, man. It was I'm sad that it doesn't roll like it used to. It used to be the biggest one in the country. 3,000 kids, 300 coaches. Used to be just a great deal, great learning environment. And you just don't do it anymore. It doesn't help in recruiting as much like it used to.
All right. Well, Scar, maybe the return of some camps or whatever else, it can happen. Scarcelli could have been the leader. He's no tomato can. Could have been some kind of spaghetti sauce, but he went blue, and he's never looked back. All right, Scar, thanks. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, let's hope for a big win. We got some hot shooting tomorrow, and have a great one, Denny. Go Blue.
Programming reminder on this feed: we will be on after the Michigan basketball game, because at 1:00 they'll be at the half against Rutgers tomorrow. So we'll talk with you after the game.